Hey everybody, this is Clayton Olson, and in this video we're going to talk about 3 controversial, sexy things that women can do that turn men on. And I'm really excited today because I have my friend and fellow coach, Jamie Thompson. Jamie Thompson is a holistic sex and intimacy coach with clients around the globe. She specializes in teaching impact-driven couples and individuals the tools to meet their sexual and intimacy needs and navigate challenges and conflicts masterfully through open, loving communication. And she refers to this practice as intimate Tai Chi. Now, she uses a combination of Jungian psychology, quantum mechanics, and communication techniques that are based in neuroscience. Now, I've personally known Jamie for several months now, and she's quickly become an incredibly good friend. And we go to coffee shops and have conversations that blow both of our minds. And I'm so excited today because I get to bring her to all of you. So Jamie, thank you for coming on board. I really appreciate having you on my channel.
Yes. Hello, Clayton. It's lovely to be here, and thank you for having me on.
All right. So as we go into these 3 points, Jamie, I think off camera, you and I were talking about femininity and how we actually have to redefine femininity and talk a little bit about how it's evolved and perhaps where it's going in order for these 3 points to really make sense. So would you mind doing the pleasure of leading us into this talk about femininity and how it is important and maybe why it's important that we need to start to redefine it?
Yes, Clayton. So one of the things that I think is really important with taking a look at femininity is looking at where we've come from. So there's the 1950s housewife archetype. And this archetype, there's the experience of women being seen and not heard, and women not really having a voice and not feeling like they are valued and listened to. And that is absolutely a problem, right? So then what happened is this big empowerment movement called feminism came about. And women began to empower themselves and say, I will be seen and heard, and I have value, and I will be listened to. And what happened in this is oftentimes with these type of movements is it skewed really far over to where some women ended up crossing over into a place of empowerment with the disempowerment of men. That gaining their power through disempowering men and through playing the game of being masculine and beating the men in their own game while sacrificing a lot of their receptivity and deep femininity that actually still wants to surrender in some way and still really wants to trust the masculine. So it seems that there's this pendulum swing from the disempowered, I'm saying these as general terms, but the disempowered 1950s housewife to the super empowered feminism woman, modern woman. We have the opportunity here to find a middle happy medium where we get to set aside the businesswoman as a choice, not because we have to, but because we choose to, as an honoring of ourself and of our partner, and as a way to really relax and be in our deep feminine receptivity. And this oftentimes is in the gray zone, because it's in this place where it's not the submissive housewife that has no choice and is not heard, but it's also not a woman who is competing with men in a men's game. It's a woman who's saying, wait a second, I'm going to redefine this whole game and play the game that I actually want to be playing. I'm just not going to play either of these 2 extreme games because that's not what actually feels good to me. And that's not who I want to be. And that's not what is going to create the kind of relationship that I want to be in. Because let's face it, if we are trying to be a man and operate in our masculine and are in a masculine power struggle with our partner, where does that leave us in relationship? It doesn't actually leave space for the polarity that creates a really juicy, embodied, masculine, feminine dynamic.
I love how you put that, because it's almost as if these 2 fears when the fear of the one that's completely surrendered and not able to own her power, and the one that's afraid of losing her power. It's almost like as they come together and you're able to take both components of each of those polarities, it's like it's able to come from love then. There's this integrated feminine third way that begins to emerge that allows a man to fully be a man in her presence, while where she's not compromising any of her power at all. And she's there out of choice, like you were saying. She's there from a place of choice rather than reacting to the guy and reacting to the fear of losing control. She's there from a place of honoring what she wants. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And I'd also like to share a little bit of my personal experience, because I have been a very empowered woman for much of my life. And I absolutely, there's a part of me that has a very hard time surrendering control and really empowering the masculine. And it's been a journey for me to allow myself to do that and to still know that I'm going to be able to show up at work and I'm going to still be able to be an empowered businesswoman, and then reserving my relationship as a place where I actually get to surrender as a gift to myself and as a way to play this other element of my dynamic human self.
I love that. And what I'm realizing is that this model of femininity is just going to be even more pronounced and distinguished as we go into these 3 points. So why don't you lead us into this first point of the sexy things, the controversial sexy things that women do that turn men on?
The first way that we can operate in our balanced feminine is by telling men what we want and simultaneously be in a receptive place of receiving it. So oftentimes when we are in our imbalanced feminine and we say what we want, it comes out like a demand. And it comes out like, you have to do this for me, or it comes out like entitlement. But when we're in the space of being in our receptive feminine nature and we're already receiving it, it occurs as an opportunity for a man. It occurs as an opportunity for a partner to really serve us. And deep down, men want to serve the feminine and they want to be useful. So if we can give them an opportunity to do that, they feel empowered in their masculinity, while we're actually polarizing them to be empowered in their masculinity while we are empowered in our femininity. But we're balanced because we are being both receptive and empowered at the same time by actually saying what we want. So there's this idea of that I call the mind reading trap. And this is when we expect men to just know what we want. And oftentimes they don't. They just don't know. And we maybe think they should, and we want them to, and we're taught in Disney fairy tales that the knight in shining armor just shows up and automatically knows what we want. But that's not necessarily always the case. And we fall into the mind reading trap when we expect them to know what we want without actually saying it. Or when we think it's not feminine to say what we want. Or when we go into out of balance feminism by demanding what we want.
Interesting. So on one end, the perhaps submissive housewife, old feminine, is not able to actually express her needs. She's not actually able to say what she wants. She might not even be connected to the things that she needs because she's so focused over there. And going the other direction, it sounds like the need is not even a need. It comes out as a demand, which I can imagine, and I felt this before, it doesn't feel like anything that I give at that point is actually a gift. It feels like an obligation as a man. And so what you're talking about is this third way, this balanced feminine of being able to ask for what you want while simultaneously holding it from a place of being able to receive fully as a request or an ask rather than a demand. Is that right?
Yes, and I think a key here is bringing vulnerability to it. So when we bring our vulnerability, it's incredibly enrolling, and it really inspires men. So when we bring our vulnerability of like, it's even vulnerable. I'll give a really simple example that happened recently of like, oh wow, it's kind of cold outside. it's vulnerable to be there and say that instead of, oh, you know what? I'm going to go get my Coke because I'm cold. Right? It's like there's a part of me that would want to just handle it myself, but there's actually a way in which it's a fun game to play. If we're just looking at all of this as a game, it's a fun game to play of like, oh, I'm cold. And then he can be like, oh yeah, let me take off my coat and give it to you. And it's like empowering the masculine to show up the way they really want to show up, by being in the feminine, by asking for what I want vulnerably, or sharing a comment about what I want instead of pursuing and going through the entire process of always being able to take care of myself and always having everything handled, which I get because that is how I've lived a lot of my life as a feminist. And it doesn't give men the room to really show up, and it doesn't give me the room to really relax.
Beautiful. And I loved your example there of it being cold outside and putting that out in the field between the two of you for the man to be able to step up. What's another example that in perhaps dating or relationships where a woman can be vulnerable and kind of walk the line of these two polarities?
An example of this is I had a really deep, intimate conversation in a date with someone, and then they didn't contact me for, I think it was 5 or 6 days afterwards. And so I was starting to feel like I wanted some contact. And so I reached out and said, hey, I'm really interested in and loving the way that you've been leading everything. And I'm kind of feeling like I'd love to talk to you again. So no pressure, but if you are inspired, I'd love to chat again sometime soon. And he responded back with, wow, thank you for not pressuring me and giving me the space to still continue to lead. And I'm so happy to hear that. I've been super busy, and I'm glad that you're thinking of me. And it was a really cool experience because it was a way that I told him what I wanted, but without it being a demand on him, but still brought my vulnerability of what it was like to be me in that moment.
It's a beautiful example. I'm hearing that it sounds like you started with some vulnerability around how you were feeling. You gave him some acknowledgement around him leading. And then you went into a request and an invitation for connection, with not from a place of pressure, not from a place of discounting yourself, but it seems like you were able to hold yourself as valuable and important, and you were also able to still honor him simultaneously, which is really a beautiful tension that opens the lines of communication in that way. And it's no surprise that you got the result that you did with that guy. Wow. Yeah. So let's move on to the second point. What is the second controversial, sexy thing that women can do to turn men on?
So the second controversial, sexy thing women can do is complete embodiment and sexual ownership. So this is about really owning and being 100% okay with exactly what our sexual desires are and what we really want and need in a relationship. So oftentimes I find that women are either compromising what they want and the kind of intimacy and the kind of connection and the kind of sex that they want in order to make a man happy. Or we have landed in some version of what we think is sexy in order to please or impress someone. And I think oftentimes what falls in this category is this idea of that we need to withhold sex in order to be desirable. And I think that the sexiest thing that we can do as women is actually feel into what the right time is for us. And instead of being in this idea that there's a time limit that is set by someone else's rules or standards that we need to abide by, that actually puts us in our head and out of our embodied feminine sensuality, which is really the place where we are empowered and therefore turning men on. A woman who is in her embodied feminine sensuality is incredibly sexy. And this woman has the ability to wait if she wants to wait and set that boundary that really feels good as far as timing for sex. But she also has the ability to break her own rules when it feels aligned. And so this controversial part is really about being in full ownership of our sexuality, and that our sexuality is not dictated by anyone else's idea of what it should be.
This is controversial. Yeah, I can imagine that. I love what you're saying, and I get the energy of it. And I can imagine that perhaps a number of women listening to this right now might be thinking, well, won't he lose respect for me if I sleep with him too soon? Or won't he, perhaps once he's got what he wants, won't he leave? Right? I think there's a saying that I've heard, and I hear this everywhere. It's, why would you buy the cow if you can get the milk for free? Right? And so that I can imagine that thought perhaps crossing some of the women's minds that are listening to this. So what would you say to that?
Well, I think we need to take a look and define what's the cow and what's the milk. I mean, is who you are the real cake, and sex is just the icing? And I think that's like a perspective that we can come from with this, that the reason why someone will come back is for you. And the reason why someone will come back is because you're amazing and you have all these amazing attributes. And sex may be one of them. And in fact, sex may be a reason why someone's like, wow, I want to go back, rather than that being a reason why someone would want to leave or be done with you. The question is, first of all, where is your value? If your value is only in sex, then that would definitely mean that you would want to hold on to that, because that's where you think your value is. But if your value is absolutely in sex, but also absolutely in who you are, then it can be a lot more of a natural unfolding that isn't limited by rules of when you should sleep with someone and when you shouldn't. Now, I also want to point out that often, sometimes women, and I've done this in the past, where it's like I've had sex with someone too soon because I thought that would be a reason why they would stay, because I wanted that attention, or I wanted that instant gratification and approval. And that's also not actually what feels best. So what I'm really making a case for here is honoring self and knowing that I have value in addition to my sex having value, but that both have value. And so it's a process that can be a lot more intuitive, and that there's not like a 1-month rule or an 8-date rule that we need to be following with how soon we will have sex with someone.
I hear two critically important and profound points in everything that you just said. There's probably more, but the two that I was able to pick out are: one, really track where you are sourcing your value as a woman. And if you are believing and operating under the presupposition that men only want sex, then it's going to make sense that's going to end up being a power struggle around sex. And that you're going to believe that the only thing you have to offer a man is sex. And what you're saying is, if that's the case, really question that and realize that there's something so much more value you do offer aside from just a physical connection with a man. And because when that value is placed there, then it allows you to actually free yourself up behaviorally with a man and kind of do what you want to do and create your own rules. And then the second piece that I think is incredibly important is what you said around almost like, why are you having sex? Are you having sex because you think that this is going to hook him, right? Is this your strategy to get this guy closer, to build the intimacy? Or is your intention because it's something that you truly want to do, because it's an expression of an already awesome connection the two of you are forming? right? So it's not the act of sex necessarily that determines whether it goes sideways. It's actually your intentions behind why you're doing it and really tapping into your own needs. Does that sound like a good summary to what you were saying too?
Absolutely. Very good summary.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to make as a point to that? That was great.
Any part of your sexuality that you are carrying shame or judgment for ends up feeling like a blank space in someone's ability to connect with you. So when we are not in full relationship of our sexuality and our desire, it's actually much harder for a man to connect with us. And it's actually hard for him to be turned on by us because we aren't embodying and in relationship with our sensuality and our sexuality. So this is why it's so important to do the internal work to eliminate any judgment that we have about anything regarding our sexual desire or what we want in intimacy, connection, and sex.
Wow. Okay. So just to echo that back, it sounds like what you're saying is that if you experience sexuality as something that you're disconnected from within yourself, that disconnection will be replicated and echoed in your relationship, no exceptions. And that's what your man experiences when he's with you, is he comes into contact with that disconnection. So by owning your sexuality, you kind of connect back with that part of yourself, and it's like an offering to him. Is that the idea?
Yes. And often I'm thinking of a client that I have right now, and it's a woman who had a lot of judgment about her sexuality. And she had the experience of often being put in the friend zone by men, where men were kind of just not that interested in her, as sexually or in having a relationship, and they were always dropping off after a few dates. And when we did the work of really going in and creating a context and foundation of full approval and permission for the parts of her sexuality that she might have thought were a little dark or a little weird, or that she just had completely numbed out and disconnected from, because our culture says that women's sexuality is supposed to look like A, B, and C. When she was really able to accept the full spectrum of it, then men started being interested in her in a more long-term basis. But when a man is looking for a partner that he can connect with sexually, and this is before you ever even have sex, because men can sense this, because they're such primal creatures in a way. They can sense when a woman is actually really dropped in and embodied in her sexuality.
So interesting, Jamie. So what I'm hearing is that when you were able to get this woman back in touch with her own sexuality and really being able to own it fully, it actually began to charge her relationships with men, so that she was now seen as someone that was attractive and sexy, rather than almost this like neutral energy that men couldn't really connect with, and they didn't even know why. Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. Profound. Profound, and it's such a testament to why it's important to work with people around shame and sexuality if you're finding that as a block that comes up in your own life. Let's move into the third point now. The third controversial sexy thing that women can do that turn men on.
The third thing is fully trusting in the masculine. So I like to play the game that I am always dating the man and really empowering men to be the man that I want them to be. So this requires looking at dating and relationship and looking at men from the perspective of they are innocent until proven guilty. So this is kind of controversial today, because there's a lot of man bashing, and there's a lot of confusion around what is really going to empower men to be who we want them to be. And I say that we should look at dating from the perspective of innocent until proven guilty.
Okay, now I love the philosophy of that, and I can imagine over here when I hear that, what about the women who have been hurt in the past? And they think, well, wait a second, I've given this innocent until proven guilty card to men many times, and I've just been taken advantage of. And I'm tired of being kind and nice, and guys have to prove themselves to me. What benefit does a woman possibly have by seeing and adopting the viewpoint that they're always dating the man? What do they get out of that?
So oftentimes I see women who stay in a relationship or a dating dynamic with someone who doesn't deserve it for way longer than they know that they should. And this is because often women are holding this idea of, well, if and when I can really surrender and really trust him, then I will know if he's the right guy. So I'm saying go in with the perspective that you can surrender and trust, but also keep a very discerning, watchful eye of paying attention to his actions, so that if he is not deserving of that trust and he's not deserving of that surrender, that you then have the boundary and the ability and the discernment, confidence in self to really end it at that point, rather than holding on, giving yourself this idea that maybe if I were to show up fully, then he would show up fully. I'm saying show up fully from the beginning so that you know that you've done that. And if he doesn't meet you there, then it's time to end it.
Wow. So by showing up fully and giving someone the innocent until proven guilty mindset, it's almost as if you leave it all on the table. And then if you do walk away, you can walk away powerfully knowing that you put your full self in the interaction and that you weren't holding back. Because what you've noticed is that for the women that perhaps stay in something too long, there's always this doubt, oh, well, I haven't really given myself. Or maybe they break up with a person, but they think, oh, they know in their heart, it's almost like they can't lie to themselves that, but wait, I was showing up in a way where I wasn't actually fully present because I wasn't trusting him. Maybe the way he was acting like an asshole, breaking my trust because I wasn't fully trusting him, right? Or he was just angry about that. So this allows you to see him clearly because you're clear.
Yes, exactly. And you're clear on what you showed up with.
Wow.
You know, so it's like, if we know, like, I showed up in full trust and empowering you to be who you really can be. I mean, as a woman, we can actually pull out the best in a man with this as well. We can actually pull out of them their potential if they're like right on the border, or maybe they're trying to step into a new level of who they want to be. We can actually polarize and call forth exactly the man that we want them to be. And if we are doing that and we are in our full feminine power and fully receptive and surrendering and really trusting their masculine, and then they don't meet us there, then it's clear. It's clear they're not ready to meet us there. And that's an easy, clean break, just like you said.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to recap that element because this is so important to hear it twice. By a woman being vulnerable in this way and having an innocent until proven guilty mindset, what she does is she invites the man to step fully into integrity in front of her, because she actually gives him the chance or the choice to kind of take one road of integrity or the other one of possibly being a dick. Whereas if she's not doing that, if she's not being vulnerable, she's not actually creating the space for the guy to step up and actually show who he is, because she's not showing who she is. Yeah, when you were talking, I could feel it in my heart as just completely true, in that the women in my life who see me, who choose to see me in the best light, there's a way that I can be with them that I can't with the ones that perhaps don't trust me or don't trust themselves around me. Wow.
Exactly. I believe that, you know, there's a lot of talk right now about the space that men need to be holding for women. And there's also a lot of men that are like, I don't know how to do that. And I believe that many of us as women know how already to be this way with men. And that we aren't doing it out of some kind of indignant stubbornness or we aren't doing it because we think that they need to prove themselves to us in some way. And I think this is only hurting our long-term intimate relationships. If we really are wanting to build something, we can actually show up in a way that really it teaches, but it also calls them forth. And in my experience, in the experience of many women I've worked with, this feels so good. We aren't spending energy with trying to power struggle and maintain some kind of power position or operate in our masculine in a way that doesn't feel good. We're actually getting to sit back and really receive what women have been wanting to receive for hundreds of years, and have been engaging in this power struggle. And I feel like the new modern feminine has this ability to straddle the surrender of the 1950s housewife and the power of feminism, and that we can really straddle these two poles and actually call a man forth in a way while still maintaining our power. And if he doesn't show up, that we have the ability to walk away, and that we know that we can set that boundary if we need to.
What I see is that you're not throwing away or discarding the old way the feminine was, and we're not necessarily disowning or rejecting the power of the feminist movement. What you're talking about is this integrated feminine model that takes the strength from both of them and brings them together so they're a complete model of how to interact with a man.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you for that recap. So there's one more thing. There's a way that we can really call men into being that is a very simple practice you can start doing today. And that is by championing the things that you like. So for example, if I'm out on a date with someone and they open the door for me, I am going to be just elated to receive that. Even if I've received it 100 times before, it still is a gift, and it's still something that I can really receive. You know, when a man takes the lead, I'll comment on it and I'll say, oh, wow, thank you. I love how you did that. You know, and really empower them to continue doing and being the ways that I ultimately want them to be. You know, they pick up something heavy and carry it for me. I'm like, wow, look at your muscles. Amazing. You know, and I really sit in that actual experience of really enjoying them being the man that I want them to be. And then I find that they just want to keep doing that. They just want to keep being that man because they really like the way it feels when I appreciate them for being the man that I want them to be.
I can't help but smile listening to you talk about that. You're saying about how you do this, and I can just feel what it's like to be in the presence of that. And there's nothing that's game playing about it, because you're truly appreciating what they're doing, right? And it does help them feel seen in a way that there's not many people that make them feel seen that way. And that's a really beautiful thing. So to recap the 3 points, the 3 controversial, sexy things that turn men on. Number 1, tell him what you want. Men want to please you. And it's up to you to tell him what you need in a way that is not demanding, but rather an invitation. Number 2, sexual ownership, embodiment. Give yourself and find ways to give yourself full permission and have ownership of your erotic desire, of your erotic creature, as Jamie calls it. And then 3, trust the masculine. Think about it like this. I think Jamie put this elegantly. You are always dating the man. Have an innocent until proven guilty mindset, because it does wonders for your clarity, and it also invites him to be the best that he can be when he's in your presence. So, Jamie, this was a phenomenal interview. I learned so much. I'm sure our viewers did as well. If people want to continue to follow you and they want to continue to get more of these juicy insights, because quite frankly, I've known you for a while now. We've had some really deep conversations, and this is just the tip of the iceberg with your knowledge about this stuff. Where can they go?
Yes, and thank you, Clayton. I feel the same way about you. So the best way that you can get a hold of me is actually through my Facebook. So you can send me a message. You can follow me on Facebook. I have a lot of content there. Subscribe to my YouTube channel here. I also put out a lot of edgier content on Instagram. And then, of course, my website. And all of these links are going to be in the description.
Yep, all of them are below this video in the description, so you can find all the links there. Jamie, thank you for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to many more coffee dates and talking about relationship philosophy. This one has been exceptional.
Absolutely. Me too. Thank you.